Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. This is Angela Tsukiji with the North State Building Industry Association. I'm the VP of Member Services, and so that means I'm in charge of membership, events, education, and information. So that's why we are here today, because we have some great information for you from Vice Mayor Donald Terry with the City of Rancho Cordova. But first, I'm going to introduce to you our sponsor for today, and that is Ishmael Ramos with Chase Home Lending. So Ishmael, do you want to take a couple seconds to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Selling Rancho Cordova. Again, another exciting education piece here we have for you. I've been working for Chase for a while now. I cover, the greater Sacramento area as far as new home financing. The one thing I always like to put out there, just with rates unknown and builders, not knowing where the market's at. I'm always here if anybody has any questions. We offer extended rate locks for your buyers. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Welcome to Vice Mayor here, Don Terry.
Thank you, Ishmael. And I appreciate Chase Home Lending for sponsoring all of our selling workshops. And so we just most recently did Selling Folsom and Selling Lincoln. Today we have Selling Rancho Cordova. And coming up in the next few months, hopefully we will have Selling West Sacramento and also Selling Elk Grove.
Awesome.
I think that's where we're going. So we're keeping really busy. Leilani Sarekia with Tim Lewis Communities is on the call, and she's the chairperson of the event committee that coordinates these workshops. So thank you very much, Leilani. Both she and Ishmael are on our Sales and Marketing Council. But with that said, I would like to turn over the mic to Cornelius Burt. Cornelius is a coworker of mine. He is one of our legislative advocates that covers Sacramento County and the city of Sacramento. So, and a little bit some of the counties up north too, and also the Utilities Committee, I believe. So in other words, Cornelius is a very busy man. So I'm very happy to have him here today so he can introduce our special guest speaker. Cornelius?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela, and good morning, everyone. It's my esteemed honor to welcome and introduce Vice Mayor Donald Terry. Vice Mayor Donald Terry was elected to the Rancho Cordova City Council in 2012. Before that, he served on the Sacramento Unified School District from 2008 to 2012, where he led and prevented the closure of Wynn Elementary School. He's a dedicated community leader. He served on the board of Bank on Sacramento. He's on the advisory board of the Sacramento Regional Development Corp. He's a former business advisory council for Sac State School of Business. Stingers up. He's on the advisory board of UC Davis Center for Regional Change and the former board president for NeighborWorks Home Ownership Center. On the city council in 2014, he led the passage of Measure H, which was a half-cent sales tax to really provide the critical funding for public safety, arts, culture, children, and youth. In addition to all the work that he does for the city of Rancho Cordova and the Sacramento region at large, he's very passionate and very engaged with Big Brothers and Big Sisters and has been a volunteer and leader in that organization for a long time. When not working for his constituents in the city of Rancho Cordova, or for us at large in the region, Donald serves as a director of real estate development for NeighborWorks, where he oversees single-family affordable housing development for an 11-county region. Donald earned his degree from UC Davis, go Aggies, and he majored in political science and with a minor in community relations. Donald is happily married to his wife, Angela, and they have two great sons, Keaton, who's 5, and Holden, who I believe is 1. So thank you so much, Donald, for being with us. And we're delighted to hear from you and learn more about the great city of Rancho Cordova.
Thank you.
He's busy You, Cornelius.
Thank you. That I think that bio's a tad bit old. Keaton's now 10 and Holden turned 6. But yeah, no, most of those details are pretty accurate. The one difference is I don't work for NeighborWorks anymore. I won't mention the bank that I work for because Chase, handsomely sponsored today's series, which I thought I was just coming to visit the board again, like we usually do in the really long table out there in Roseville. So I didn't realize that this was a series and that I was the Rancho Cordova guy. So that's awesome. But yeah, no, my day job now, I'm a Community Reinvestment Act officer for Northern California's largest community bank. So I oversee, well, Ishmael, you'll appreciate this. I oversee the CRA and HMDA data compliance team, along with all of the community relations for my bank. And it's a very interesting time in the housing world, I will tell you. Pre-pandemic, my bank had never done more than 100 mortgages in a month. And since this all started, we haven't done less than 100 mortgages. And so we've broken records nearly every month for the last 12 months. And it's just been a fascinating ride with, an economy where there has been so much pain in the last year, but there still really are resilient and thriving parts of the economy. And I think finance, housing, and if you're in the lumber business these days, boy, I picked the wrong year to get into woodworking. I will tell you, all these YouTube videos to teach me how to build a chair or whatever else, and it says right on the bottom, this will cost less than $50, and I get it done, and it's $180 or something, because the cost of materials, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, have just skyrocketed. And Cornelius was mentioning I used to work for a nonprofit doing affordable housing development for home ownership. And I want to say I was talking to my former construction manager, about, 3 months ago, and he said that lumber's like 90% more expensive than it was, 4 years ago. I can only imagine what that's doing to the market, on top of all of these Bay Area buyers fleeing and wanting to buy new homes in our community. So a few highlights, I guess, that I wanted to share today. Cornelius mentioned Measure H, which I think was really a watershed moment for Rancho Cordova. It added about, when we were campaigning for it, we expected it to raise about $5 to $6 million a year, and it's averaging about $8.5 million as of even last year. Which is a little bit of a dip. Obviously, there was lower revenues for most places in this region, but some of you supported this. But we also had another measure that we passed this past fall when we found out that STA wasn't going to move forward with another Measure A. Our city council decided to put another half-cent sales tax on the ballot that in the short term is really going to be focused on economic development, COVID relief and support. And long-term, really focusing in on infrastructure needs, roads, sidewalks, bridges, bike trails, White Rock Road, the Southeast Connector. Those are all things that tax measure will ultimately be focusing on. And it was pretty interesting because if you were watching that last election, Citrus Heights kind of did the exact same thing. They actually went for a full cent sales tax to actually keep up with where our level was and where the city of Sacramento is and where West Sac is. And theirs failed by about 2%, and ours passed by about 2%. And I would probably say that looking at polling and a lot of other things, it should have done a lot better, and it just didn't. Although I would tell you there's a lot of internal polls that said that there are a whole bunch of people that should have been reelected in California that didn't get reelected. So I'm not sure how great polling was this last election. Some exciting things going on on Folsom Boulevard that I wanted to share. One is we're probably within 6 months of deciding exactly what our Civic Center project is going to look like on Folsom Boulevard, that we're working with Griffin Swinnerton and can't remember and Rios Development to design not only a high density housing product on Folsom Boulevard, but also roughly a 30 to 80,000 square foot community center right there at Mather Road and Folsom Boulevard. And it's about a 10-acre site that we acquired about 3 years ago. So we're really, really excited about seeing that hopefully break ground next year. We already started the tenant improvements on our new youth center on just off of Folsom Boulevard. And this is the old Center for Praise church that was leased to the city for $1 a year on a 50-year lease. It's about a 9,000 square foot church that we're going to be turning into a youth center that's going to be operated by our Police Activities League, likely the Boys and Girls Club, and a handful of other youth-focused nonprofits in our city. It's pretty much our city's first foray into kind of park service. Being out where we are and being such a young city, you know, we have a separately elected park district here that runs our parks, and they're not always the easiest to work with. So this will be our first foray into running our own youth services. It'll probably actually create a new division within the city government for us. So we're really, really excited about that. You know, assuming we get past this pandemic, I'm hoping that we would have kids in there for service by the fall, or at least partially service, maybe just outdoor services. Let's see. A lot of you probably have read in the news that I like to always say it this way, that when Gary Davis and Jim Cooper were on the city council in Elk Grove, we used to always say that the best things about Elk Grove came from Rancho Cordova. But one of the really great things that I think might have just been Elk Grove's loss and became Rancho Cordova's gain is we're in negotiations right now with Cal North State University, excuse me. We're in discussions with them, looking at a handful of different sites within the city for a comprehensive teaching hospital, nursing school, and pharmacy school located in Rancho Cordova. So this is the deal that was in Elk Grove. Their planning commission decided not to approve it, and they chose, instead of going to the city council where it was probably going to get shot down, they started working with us, and we're evaluating sites and seeing if it's something that we can pull off. So we're really optimistic that'll come home for us. We also, in the last probably 3 months, we've acquired, I think, 5 different parcels along Folsom Boulevard that we're going to be looking at some different development options, where mainly for trying to focus in on housing on Folsom Boulevard and to try to densify the boulevard and bring more people with disposable income there, so we can hopefully revitalize that area in the coming years. Another pretty exciting one, if you've driven down Folsom Boulevard in the last handful of years near KP International and where Pep Boys is, you would see our perpetual going out of business furniture store that would change hands about every 9 months, and then we get a new furniture store and a new furniture store. And excitingly, the sign actually went up this week and they're doing their tenant improvements to put a Harbor Freight in that site, which, for those of you who go to Harbor Freight, you know, it's an awesome store. It'll be a good solid tenant there, and hopefully keep that parking lot full, unlike what it's looked like the last handful of years. You know, and I got asked, it's interesting, I was meeting with some constituents last week, and they were asking me, you know, what's keeping you up at night when it comes, you know, we've got all these tax measures, so, you know, we're one of the best funded cities probably in the region. I have the expectation that in the next 10 years, we'll probably have, you know, more public safety officers per capita than anyone in the region, just because we don't have the pension overhangs that you see in a lot of other places. It's kind of interesting when we were talking to folks about our tax measures and supporting them and looking at how other cities in the region have utilized their tax measures, whether you look at Measure U in Sacramento or in West Sac and a handful of other places. And, you know, if you track it 3 or 4 or 5 years after they passed them, 70 to 80% of it has gone to increased pension costs. I think I'm still right on this, but I believe we have 7 retirees from our city at the moment. And so we could pre-fund all of our pension obligation. We're not actually allowed to do that by PERS. So it's kind of a fascinating thing that when we raise our revenues within the city, nearly 100% of that is going back into the community in the form of jobs and funding to businesses, whether it's infrastructure or direct services. So one thing that we're really, really proud about is that actually started from our Measure H initiative was our Promise program. So if any of you are familiar with that, basically a student that can't afford to go to community college, it started off with, if a student couldn't afford to go to community college, we would pay for it. And it was such a great idea that the state of California stole it from us. And now the state of California pays for the first 2 years of community college. And now we're funding things like transportation funds to get students to and from school. During COVID, we're now paying for technology and broadband access, paying for their books, or even giving them meal stipends or food stipends to make sure that they're successful in community college. It's been so successful that even if you compare it to a community that I feel like we're still striving to be like, is West Sacramento, where they launched a Promise program. It wasn't nearly as generous as ours. And I think they've had about 50 to 100 students go through it. We've had about 500 students go through it in the exact same amount of time. And it's because of the amount of support that we're putting into the program. And this year, we're actually starting to explore targeted job sectors for displaced workers. So people that were in, food service and hospitality, we're going to start funding them to go back to community college in targeted areas like the trades, in nursing, in cyber security, and cyber coding. And so we're really, really excited about the interest that might have. And again, not just the normal Promise program is graduating high school seniors. So those high school seniors that are about to graduate, we will fund them in the fall. We're actually going to do that for anybody that's in a displaced job sector. And so we're really, really excited to see that take off with Folsom Lake College and Los Rios Community College in general. So this won't just be a partnership with Folsom Lake College. This will be any community college within the Los Rios system. So if they need to go to ARC for a class, they need to go to Sac City College, they can do that as well. So really, really excited. I think there's a lot of optimism and hope now that we're seeing these vaccines get rolled out. I don't know who's on what team, but I'm Team Moderna and waiting for my second shot here. Was it May 1st? And so planning a small celebration with me and my wife on May 15th when we're fully vaccinated. So hopefully you all do that and consider coming to Rancho Cordova and eating one of our great restaurants and stay in one of our hotels and enjoy the American River. And yeah, but Cornelius, I don't know what you were hoping for, but hopefully I covered at least some of it.
You mentioned, Vice Mayor, you mentioned North State Medical School and the hospital. Is there any other active development key infrastructure projects in the pipeline in Rancho Cordova?
There's talk of a handful of other things. One that's probably halfway done is the new UC Davis Medical Center that's going to be here. And I say medical center, UC Davis Health is moving. It's not a medical center. They're moving HR, IT, their call center, all right across the street from City Hall. So the old B of A call center that was right there at White Rock and Zinfandel. I want to say it's about 140,000 square feet in total, maybe a little bit bigger. It's that building and the building across the street. They're going to spend about $50 million in tenant improvements and move about 1,500 employees off of the main campus in Oak Park into Rancho Cordova. So we're excited to see that. Again, we're really in the infancy stages of the CNU conversation. They spent 5 years looking in Elk Grove at a site that they were going to have to knock down and rebuild completely. The nice thing about Rancho is we do have a handful of sizable lots, vacant, raw land. We're really something of that size could go in something like Westboro that's within the city, or Rio Del Oro. We probably need to do some rezoning to make that work. And one of the really exciting things, if you look at our city comparatively to a lot of other areas that do have developable land, is because of Mather Air Base and the need for low density along the flight path and the approach path into Mather we have to have this kind of swath of industrial and light industrial and low density development right through the middle of Rio del Oro. And one of the things that does for us is it ensures that we're going to continue to have available industrial space within the city. And one thing that we've been seeing, especially through the pandemic, is one, the vacancy rates are about, I think, 0.5% right now in our commercial and industrial area, or our industrial and light industrial. But what we also saw is those were the businesses that never had to shut down. There were a lot of manufacturing, construction, the auto dismantlers, they all went to work every day. And it's also a whole bunch of jobs that you can't do remotely. So our lunch crowds are down, trust me. I mean, VSP and a lot of the insurance companies, those are things that you can do remotely. But if you looked at our industrial park during the pandemic, there were cars going in and out of there all day long. And so on that side of our commercial park, you really saw a thriving economy and not nearly as much of a pullback. And so as we're, right now, I've had meetings to talk about new industrial developments that we're going to see in those areas. I think our conundrum has always, and whenever I'm talking to the BIA, our conundrum is always the opposite or the invert of what Elk Grove struggles with, right? Elk Grove has all of these residents within their community and a lot of housing, and they've got to give away the farm to get jobs, right? And we're kind of the converse of that. We have the largest private sector job hub in Northern California, and what we've got to figure out is how to sell your houses and get more and more people to stop commuting from Roseville and Elk Grove and Folsom and move to Rancho Cordova and ride their bike and walk to work. And so developments like Rio and all of the Woodsides and everything else that we're seeing down here, Cressley and Premier Homes that are all getting started down here, I think, really is giving that offering of you can live and work or you can live where you work. And, if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that commuting sucks. And when you've been at home, and my commute is now from 9 feet over there to here, although I get stuck in this room sometimes for 10 hours a day. But a lot of people don't want to get back in their cars, and they know that. I mean, we're having that conversation at my bank right now that once we're all vaccinated, what's the return to work? And I try to remind folks, I'm salaried. You're getting at least 2 hours extra for me not having to drive to Roseville, where my office technically is. And so I think as people have come to the realization that they can function sometimes not in an office, their choices of where they want to live have drastically changed as well.
That's great to hear. And, it's great to hear that the city wants to add more housing and our members build great quality housing and home and housing options for folks. And we're happy to be a partner with you and the city team on that. Love to open it up for questions from members and guests on the Zoom for the Vice Mayor.
Yeah, actually, I believe Heather Hoffman with Elliott Homes has a question, at least one question, I'm sure. Whoops, I'm sorry, I just muted you, Heather. Can you unmute again? There you go.
Hi there. So as you mentioned Rio a lot, we are very excited for our upcoming community. It is going to be a big thing for Elliott Homes and basically the next 15, 20 years for us. So we're very excited to continue our roots in Rancho Cordova. But as I finish my current community of Stone Creek, which has been going for 20 years, and we get ready to ramp up for Rio, we're kind of in this lull and we're talking to buyers and they're having some questions about what else is coming besides us to Rancho. And, there's always been this speculation of a couple things. So is there an update on Amazon and those jobs?
Define Amazon. Do you mean
Well,
because
the distribution I think is coming.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, because there were those two headquarters. One was going to be in New York and one was going to be outside of DC. And We didn't get either of those. And then I think New York didn't get it anyways. There is talk of a couple of different sites for an Amazon distribution center. So my understanding of what Amazon is looking to do, and right now, I would say in the last 12 months, obviously, Amazon has been the 800-pound gorilla of commercial development and commercial acquisition for land across the country. And so when I talk to my colleagues and peers anywhere, Amazon is talking to everyone about everywhere. So I don't want to be too optimistic when I share what I'm about to share, but there is talk of having a distribution center, likely about half the size of what was built in Metro Air Park, I think, or Air Metro Park, whatever it is over there by the airport. And so what they're looking to do in communities across the country, and I guess across the world, is that last mile distribution hub. And for us, I think it only makes sense when you look at really who are their competitors and who they're working with, right? So we have the FedEx and the UPS distribution center already in Rancho. All of their air comes through Mather anyways. And so it's only logical to look at us for some of that. There's a handful of sites to have it at. And I think part of the struggle not for me, but I would say for some of my colleagues is, there's that hope that this one place was someday going to be, Amazon's headquarters, right? Or it was going to be, insert, Apple's second headquarters or something. And do we want to give that up for an Amazon distribution center? For me, yeah, sure. I think that's fine. Because, this is the economy that we're in. And if you look at, who has had the exponential growth in the last 12 months, it's logistical companies like Amazon and, DoorDash and a handful of other places. I will say we're the first city in this region to cap the fees that are charged to restaurants from delivery apps. I just want to point that out. But yeah, as far as Amazon, I'm optimistic that we're going to find a spot for them. But it's going to take a come to Jesus moment for some of my colleagues to go, okay, that one place that you thought was going to be, the headquarters that we steal away from San Francisco, it's not going to be that. Like, we're not building the Salesforce Tower in Rancho Cordova. And it might just have to be an Amazon distribution center.
Okay. Another question I had was, is there an update on the rendering plant? When we had our first Selling Rancho Cordova meeting, I'm totally blanking on his name. I think he's our current mayor in Rancho, but
Garrett,
Yes.
Garrett, yes, thank you. He had hinted at possibly a relocation to Woodland. That was like 2 or something years ago.
Okay.
So what's the latest update?
Yeah. So as part of serving on the city council, we serve on a lot of boards and commissions. So I've served the last 9 years on the Sacramento Air Quality Management District. I was chair for a couple of years. I'm the immediate past chair now. And so I'm going to answer this question, and you may learn more about this subject than you ever wanted to know, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. One, because of the Right to Farm Act, that rendering plant is considered an ag service. And therefore, whatever it smells like is nobody can do anything about it because it's protected by the Right to Farm Act. So what has happened since development went into the east of that site, and like, I'm east of that site, I smell that thing sometimes. What has happened in the last 2 years essentially is the landowner, in working with the county, got a rezone to residential for that land, which increased the value of that land by a lot. But what they have to do with that land, because that company doesn't want to go out of business, right? So they want to sell their land for enough to site and buy land somewhere else and build another one of those things, and then they will shut down the one that's there. I don't know where anyone came up with it. It's going to Woodland. I think that's, yeah, there's absolutely no way for any of us to know where it's going. And you can imagine anywhere where they're going to build one of those things is going to be a tough thing to build. Let's put it that way. That rendering plant started off in East Sac, then it moved to somewhere near Power Inn, I've been told, and then it finally moved out to here. So I believe this is the second or third place. Actually, it might have even been in South Sac and then went to somewhere by Power Inn and then came out here. So this is the third move to the east to get away from houses and people. And the community just keeps growing, and they've gotten surrounded again by development. So optimistically, I would hope that in the next 5 years, somebody puts an option to buy that land, and that gives them the understanding and what financing they need to do in order to go find land somewhere else and start the process to build it. But, and I told people this during the last campaign, I would be amazed if they pulled that off anything less than 10 years from now. I think would be the best case scenario. Maybe I'm a little pessimistic, but at the same time, I don't like to overpromise something that literally, as somebody on the air district, I have no control over.
I do have another question, but I didn't want to hog the floor if someone else wants to go.
Go ahead, Heather.
Is there an update on when the National Guard building will be ready, or is it probably on hold with COVID?
I don't know when it's going to be finished. I see lots of cars parked there, so they're getting close. I want to say that they were slated to finish it this summer. I don't know what kind of slowdowns they've had. The unique thing with the National Guard, and if anybody's been driving by, you see a new water tower over by the VA hospital. We don't get to have any oversight of those kinds of projects. The state does their own thing, and that water tower that just went up, I was driving by and they hadn't even finished putting it up. And I was texting my city manager going, "What is this?" And then as I got closer, I realized it was on the VA's land. So the state and the feds don't have to let us know their progress. So I'll find out for you, Heather. But at this point, we were told they were going to be moving in this summer, but I'm not sure what kind of construction delays they had. But it's getting to the point of finish. All the windows are in. I'm seeing lights on inside of it, so it's getting close. So they're just doing internal tenant improvements. And I want to say lately I have seen them parking a lot of cars. Can't think of that cut through road that goes in right by the VA and Kaiser there. But there's a lot of cars having to be parked up there because I believe they're finishing the parking lot. So it's getting close. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people in there this fall. But to your point with COVID, how many of those jobs can they do remotely? And my guess is the state of California is going to be one of the last ones to do a return to the office, right? To in-person working.
And then just one more question with Security Park, do you guys have any plans to kind of help either hide it a little better? Because it's pretty much an eyesore for everyone around in residential areas around that.
That's a good question. I don't know if there's anything we could do about hiding the biggest building there, aside from surrounding it with water towers or something. And maybe you and I should go talk to Harry about how we would do that somehow. Because most of that land would be on Rio, right? So I don't know. The outbuildings, I think there's been some discussion. I'm trying to remember. We did have a workshop or a discussion around some unique fencing and landscaping that they wanted to do around there. And I'm trying to remember. I'll try to get you an update on that. I remember looking at renderings of tree surroundings with a fence and some other stuff that they wanted to do out there. And God, I want to say it's been in the last 12 months. Everything just seems like a blur since last March, but I'll find out for you. But I recall looking at some different plants and trees, and Linda Budges on our council is the one that's usually the most opinionated about design and that kind of stuff. And I know she didn't like some of the trees they were picking and stuff, but I can't remember if we ever finalized that work, but I'll look into it again.
Are there any other questions for Donald? No,
I covered everything.
it sounds like it. Well, thanks for the great questions, Heather.
Yeah, thank you.
I have
Mhm.
I have another question. Vice Mayor, can you maybe talk about some of the infrastructure and transportation updates in the city? I know there's a lot of talk about at the national level, transportation and infrastructure, and maybe the Southeast.
Yeah, we're at the national level. I will tell you. So we're going to be receiving from the last stimulus, the Rescue Act, I want to say, to the tune of about about $15 million over the next 2 years. It'll be about 8 or 9 million this year, about 7 or 8 million next year. A lot of that has to be COVID related, so it's very specific. But some of it can be infrastructure related. And like I said, our Measure R, I think, will probably, I will say, at least in a couple years, I think there's still a lot of COVID related things that we want to do. Rental assistance, broadband assistance, that kind of stuff, that kind of other infrastructure that everybody's been talking about. But it'll probably increase our annual infrastructure funding, the public works funding, by, I would say, 80% a year. Because assuming the council sticks to what we said we were going to do, which was that we were going to focus it in on infrastructure. A handful of that, though, too, I think will really be focused in on some of those big lift projects that we need to do. The widening of White Rock Road near Rio Del Oro, our portions of the Southeast Connector. It's been a handful of years, but I know years ago when I was serving on the Sac State School of Business Advisory Council, or whatever they called it, and Dr. Varshney had done the economic output study for the Southeast Connector, which had had 4 times more economic output than the arena did in downtown Sacramento, just by building that road, and what that would attract as far as development in the suburb areas of Rancho Cordova, Sacramento, Elk Grove, El Dorado Hills. And so that project, I want to say there's some sort of groundbreaking, some sort of event happening in Folsom in the next week or two. And so they're getting started on their portion. If we can get the housing built out that far, I think we have some really big opportunities to see not just growth within Rancho Cordova, but probably also in the unincorporated county in between us and Folsom, and even in the Elk Grove area. Another thing as far as infrastructure indirectly is, we're still in talks with Elk Grove Unified, and we've had a really productive last few years with them around the middle school, high school development in the south area of Rancho. And one of the things we started looking at is actually an infrastructure package where if they commit to building the middle school first as a 7 through 12 school, that we would assist with some of the infrastructure that they need to get that site activated. And so, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a major step forward for Elk Grove Unified. You talked to them a few years ago, they would say, we will never build a high school without we would never build a middle school without the high school first, and build them all at the same time. And for them to go in and go, yeah, we would build something that would house a small school, a small middle school, high school, do that for 5 years. And then once we have the critical mass of students, we'll go build the high school. If you would ask them 6-7 years ago, they would say they would never consider doing that. Today, when you look at the commute of people that live in my neighborhood to Pleasant Grove, it's about 45 minutes each way. So you're talking, by the time my kids are in middle school or high school, that commute's probably about an hour because of the growth and the lack of growth in infrastructure. And so, for a city like mine with 4 school districts, and all of them in different sets of going back to in-person learning, and you got even parts of Sac City Unified that, the day that the high school students are supposed to be back on campus, so they're going to have a strike for 2 days. The disparity access to education and infrastructure and resources and jobs couldn't be more different depending on where you live within our city.
So Donald, that kind of ties into a question that Steve from Woodside Homes has asked, and just in regards to a more specific time frame of a new middle school or high school in the Sunridge area for the south of Douglas communities.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. So we've been working closely with the school district for years to get them to start to entertain this idea that you don't need to fill a high school in order to build a middle school and a high school. The middle school down here is already impacted. They've warned new families that they may not be able to go to the closest middle school, and they may be offloaded to another middle school and commute even further. And so what we're trying to do, really, it's in the not Sun River, I'm missing it. It's the Sun Creek area, looking at a high school, middle school. Really, it would just be building the middle school. And one of the things that we've talked about committing to it is also our library fund, to look at, we would actually fund part of the building of a library that would also be a public library. So when the school's not in session, the public would be able to access the library, and we would be able to offset some of the costs for the construction of the school. So again, these are all things that we're looking at. But the school district, I guess one of the other variables here that we can't really control is half of all new school construction come from state bonds. And the last state bond that they tried to pass, which unfortunately drew the Prop 13 number, failed. And so, unless the state can pass another school bond pretty soon, that could really hamper our efforts here. So I'm talking about all of this, but the reality is that we're talking about how do we fund half of the school. The other half of the school has got to come from the state, and right now they're not selling bonds. So I believe Elk Grove Unified fronted the money for 2 elementary schools, so that they're still waiting for the state to pass another bond so that they get paid back for that. So as far as capital wise, it's a little tough, but as far as the local folks working with each other, we've come a long way from, waiting until there's enough kids to build a $150 million facility to, are there enough kids to build something that costs $40 million?
Well, that ties in with another question from Carmen Bird over at Lion Real Estate. She's asking if there's a consideration of a trade school.
Well, we have, I guess I'd want to know more about that question, but in the last 5 years, we've opened a sheet metal worker trade school, and IBEW moved their trade school from the unincorporated county on to the old Bureau of Automotive Repair right there on, was that International? No, yeah, on International. So we have those two, and then I want to say the Western Electrical Contractors Association has a trade school in Rancho. So we have a handful of them. So I'm not, am I answering that question, or was there something else that you had in mind? Oh, Angela, you're on mute.
Maybe she was wondering if there was if there's consideration of a new trade school perhaps coming into town.
Not at the moment, but like I said, through our Promise program, we're going to start funding pre-apprenticeship programs or pre-apprenticeship courses for students that are interested in going into the trades. And so that could be anybody from a displaced job sector. So, if you were in food service, and, we fully expect that, the 50% or 70% dip that industry saw, that we're not going to see all those jobs come back in the next 5 years. And so if somebody wants to get trained in nursing or go into the trades or go into cybersecurity and coding and software, those are things that we'll fund for you.
Okay, thank you. And then I have Ron Mancuso with Mancuso Real Estate that has a question for you as well in regards to fees.
Okay.
So Ron.
Donald, just curious about proposed builder fees. Do you see those increasing? Do you see a freeze? What do you see in that arena?
That's a good question. So I want to say in my first few years, we got rid of purple pipe, which I considered the pipes to nowhere, because there was no source to get gray water to use them, right, within new construction. I was told at the time that saved $5,000 to $7,000 a unit, just in materials and design and everything else. We adopted a new CIP, I'm going to say 5 years ago, that came with a bit of a reduction. I don't see us opening up that can of worms again anytime soon. Like I was just saying, 4 or 5 years ago, lumber cost 50% less than it does today. So I think if we were to go down that path right now, I think it would just explode the numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody's interested at the moment in revisiting that subject, which is, we have to do a nexus study and come up with what those costs were for those different things. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a freeze, but again, aside from doing another study, that would be the only way that we would see a fee change. I don't see anybody sitting around going, "Oh my God, we're not going to have enough money in 30 years to build."
Right.
So,
and that's what we're hopeful for, because bottom line, lumber costs, supply costs, they flow up, they flow down, right? I mean, with whatever the market is, but government fees tend to just kind of move in one direction usually. So
yeah, I mean, I will tell you that since I've been on the council, they've only gone down.
Okay.
As far as when we put our hands on them, right? So when the last time, we did a study, it was coming out of a recession, and a lot of things cost less than they did when they studied them the first time.
Right.
We also got rid of a lot of, in my opinion, unnecessary expectations on certain things, like pedestrian bridges across all 4 side crosswalks at Sunrise and Douglas. And at some point, somebody thought it was a good idea to make Sunrise Boulevard look like, Las Vegas Boulevard, where you never have to touch the sidewalks. And so I think we've done a pretty good job of that. I feel like we bent pretty well, I guess. But yeah, now if we had to go back and look at it, yeah, I think all materials and labor and everything are probably up. My guess 50%. I don't know, since the last time we looked at it. So I don't think anybody's ready to join that exercise again anytime soon.
Good news. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from our members? Nope. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. We sincerely appreciate your time, Donald.
Thank you. And thank you to you and all of your members. I mean, like I said, there are a handful of places that were really, really shining stars of an economy, and housing development really, I think, is going to continue to be one for many years into the future. If we just look at the demand of people relocating right now, it just seems like, it's the first time we've seen rent decreases in the Bay Area in my lifetime, as far as I know it. And it's because so many people are looking at it and going, look, I paid $3,500 or $4,000 in rent, and I can get a pretty nice house out, somewhere where I can have a lawn and my kids can have a dog, and I can still work for, Google and Facebook, right? I saw a question there about HOAs or not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We had a conversation, I don't know, in the last couple of months, or the last month or two, about HOAs, also about CC&Rs and kind of how we would treat new developments. We're probably going to have another conversation about that. I think a couple of our newer members, I don't think understand what HOAs could do to turning off certain developers from wanting to develop and build within our communities. And the point of that conversation was really that one of my colleagues for years had been telling the development community and the general community at large that every development had to have enforceable CC&Rs that the city could enforce, and that we wanted HOAs, and that it had somehow been agreed to that the city had a policy when we didn't actually have a policy. Yet our staff, when they would sit down to meet with you to talk about your DAs, said, you have to do this if you want to build in our community. And so we finally had a discussion about it and actually counted noses and hands to see if we actually have a policy. So I believe there's going to be at some point an actual vote on it. And we did have a couple of council members that said that they would prefer to see developments have HOAs. But again, I would hope that as we continue to talk about that Cornelius and the rest of the BIA express to my colleagues what affects forcing. Well, we couldn't force an HOA, but if there are shared property or community-owned properties and things like that, then you'd have to have one. So if you have a clubhouse or you have a park that's managed by an HOA,
Right.
then you have to, by law, I believe, have a body to govern it. And so I guess my ask to you is that as we continue to have this conversation, stay engaged in it and make sure that you're educating my colleagues about what certain kinds of mandates might do, one, to the sellability of your community. So a lot of people don't want to live in an HOA. I live in an HOA, and there are good things and bad things about it. But also, what would it do in your mind when you're deciding where you're going to build and where you're going to acquire land if we had a policy like that? And would you choose to go build somewhere else because you don't want the headache of what that might do?
And this is Cornelius with the BIA. I just want to thank the Vice Mayor for his leadership on that issue and clarifying some of the challenges an HOA would have. And when that issue emerged in the city, the BIA was staunchly and remains staunchly opposed to a mandatory HOA on all new development. And we were delighted that the council passed a policy that requires enforceable CCNRs that prohibits recreational vehicles and RVs. Obviously, the city's trying to solve some of the code enforcement issues, but we don't believe an HOA is the right way to go about it. So we'll continue to stay engaged and update the membership accordingly, but we are staunchly opposed to increasing HOAs unnecessarily.
Yeah. If a developer thinks that's a selling point and they want to do it, by all means, do it. But I just don't think it's the city's role to do that. And again, it really came down to one of my colleagues claiming to developers and staff and everybody that we had somehow agreed to something. And I know that in 9 years, no one had ever asked me my opinion on that subject. And that was more why we had that hearing.
Any last questions for Vice Mayor today?
Well, thanks for your time, and keep selling Rancho.
Yes. Thank you very much. And so everybody, if you have any issues or any questions in regards to what's going on in Sacramento County, City of Sac, in Rancho Cordova, please be sure to connect with Cornelius. He is our main voice for the BIA in those areas. And so he deals with all kinds of issues and questions and communicates with Donald and his fellow city council members on a regular basis, and city staff too. So Cornelius is your guy. And our other guy is Ishmael. Thank you. Thank you so much for sponsoring today and sponsoring all of our selling workshops. And thank you again, Donald. We really appreciate your time and your passion for what you do in your time outside of your family and your job. So thank you very much.
And my 5 years of building single family homes, I have a newfound respect for everybody that's on this call.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the information. It's going to help us sell new homes in the Rancho Cordova area. So thank you very much.
Happy to help. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.